once again to the Finance Forum with myself, Abdu-Raof Hanslo, and today we don't have a special guest in studio. We've just concluded a tremendous marathon of a series on financial planning, and my guest in studio for the entire series was Mohammed Jaffer from Mojaf Financial Services, a well-established financial service provider in Cape Town who has rendered a tremendous amount of assistance to our community in the form of financial planning and general financial advice. So the series basically that we're concluding has been a series that is so pertinent to our community as far as the doings and the runnings of your life from birth to death. So the aspects taken into account are everything. It took your entire life into account as far as investments are concerned, as far as general savings are concerned, as far as insurance, medical aid, and even retirement planning. So Mohammed Jaffer unpacked a tremendous amount of information, and just to give you a short synopsis of that, as a conclusion to the series, we'd like to just run through all the various phases of one's life. So in the financial life cycle, according to Mohammed Jaffer and according to the FBI, the Financial Planning Institute, there's various phases in one's life where various products and various mechanisms come into play. Those mechanisms basically would guarantee, well, guarantee is a bad word to use, but more facilitate the needs one requires throughout one's life and what is required of us to sustain ourselves into the future. So if it starts at birth, basically the responsibility of saving for a child falls on the parents of that child. So savings mechanisms such as unit trust investments, such as share investments, such as endowment policies, all of that was unpacked during the series over the last 12 weeks. The various products like unit trust was unpacked in detail, giving us a broad synopsis of exactly what is available to us in both the conventional space as well as the Sharia compliant space. Attached to that as well, as far as investments were concerned, we also unpacked a tremendous amount of information regarding endowment policies and where this fits into as far as financial planning is concerned. When one looks at these policies like endowment policies, one very quickly realizes that there are old system policies and new age innovations brought to light as far as savings mechanisms are concerned. These specifically do offer wealth creation at an additional cost to normal investments, but with benefits of maybe not seeing the tax deducted from your investment in a capital gains perspective. The planning around this basically is not something that one just sucks out of your thumb, and that this was made very clear by Mohammed Jaffer. Clearly there's a financial plan that needs to be drawn up, and only a certified financial planner or registered financial planner can do this. The plan basically consists of your risk analysis, finding out exactly what your appetite for the risk is and where you should fit into as far as the investment structures are concerned. It also takes into account your current situation and your needs over your wants when looking at your lifestyle and looking at the future for yourself. So when a child is born, basically there's a tremendous amount of products that's available for saving mechanisms for a child, and I myself have learned that one can look at long-term investment policies at a higher risk for the child and maximizing the benefit as far as performance and growth in the investment is concerned. And these measly investments start at as little as 250 Rand a month and pushes all the way up to unlimited amounts of contribution per month. Also attached to this is, during one's lifespan, one realizes that there's focused types of savings, and those focused types of savings was very intriguing to me. Being a father of 2 children, I very quickly realized that one needs to take the bull by the horns and find a solution to future expenses. For example, if one looks at schooling today, schooling is not cheap anymore. If one looks at one of the top schools in Cape Town, let's just, for example, look at a school like Rustenburg Girls High, then you're looking at expenditure of about 60 to 80,000 rand per annum just for the school year. If you have 2 kids, that's 160,000 rand per year, which you will be forking out for educational costs in current times. If one looks down the line, in about 10 years, that cost will surely have increased substantially. So it would be very viable and very important, if one is looking for proper education for your child, to start saving early for these types of events. The one major factor that we all concerned about, and we see it in the news quite often, is the university and the trouble surrounding the fees that students have to pay at universities. Currently there's a huge call for the abolishment of fees by a group of students. However, we know that's impossible, as who's going to pay for this type of education? So one needs to make the proper allowances and put together the proper saving mechanisms in order to facilitate the need for educational costs at a tertiary level. These educational costs, one can start quite early. According to Muhammad Jaffa, and I was pleasantly surprised that a savings can be started as early as 1 day old. So if a child is born in a hospital, nothing stops you from taking that birth certificate to an investment manager or to a financial planner and saying, I'd like to start an investment for my child. Over time, that can only benefit the youngster and start him out in life on a good footing as far as education is concerned. Once the child has now reached school and has completed school, and now he's at tertiary level and is now studying at university or technikon, there's always additional costs, and many a times we find that our kids and ourselves, we have to look at student loans and various other options in order to accommodate the costs of education. So that in itself puts our child on a very bad starting in life, and that in itself basically could determine whether he would be successful in a career going forward or not. The financial planning process takes all of this into account, and throughout life it plans for every little aspect throughout one's life. So in the life cycle of an individual, financial plan, the plan put in place by a financial planner can definitely benefit, and the advice rendered by the financial planner should never be taken lightly. This is advice that's calculated, and advice that certainly would assist in all these expenditures going forward in life. So now we move on from, I think it was about program 4 in the series, where Muhammad switched from basically tertiary now to entering the workplace and planning your life in your start of your career. So in starting your life, basically, what's the first thing that we think of once we've graduated? Number one, we obviously look at finding a job, and finding a job that would be sustainable to us, and then planning further from there. The girlfriend comes into light, or the girlfriend or boyfriend, and marriage is on the cards, and before you know it, you then decide it's time to tie the knot, and now your life starts. not as one, but as a family. In this scenario, basically, what should one do in order to make sure that your life as a family would be sustained into the future? The same as your parents did at birth, according to the financial plan in an ideal situation, one must also look at the various aspects of planning for the future. So planning for the future at marriage doesn't only mean planning as far as kids are concerned. Also looks at planning for your retirement years and planning for those risky times in life, like hospitalization or emergencies. So after one's married, now you obviously look at starting the family by raising kids, and there comes expenditure from the beginning. We all know that one wouldn't want to go to a public hospital in order to have your child come into the world. Private hospitals, however, if one goes privately without a medical aid or medical insurance, this is exceptionally costly. So financial planning takes this into account as well, and as far as risk covers are concerned, the financial plan always takes into account the risky events throughout life. Medical aid as well is one of those options. So under this risk coverage with medical aid, we see basically different facets. Medical aid is basically broken down into medical aid with savings options, as well as a hospital plan that just covers you for hospital. Medical aid comprehensive basically covers you for the day-to-day events, as well as hospitalization and emergencies. And Muhammad Jaffer unpacked this in a very nice way to say that looking at the importance of having this type of risk cover in your life in order to facilitate those emergencies, and also to give you peace of mind going forward in the event of an emergency with yourself, your child, or your spouse. When looking at risk, he also mentioned that one should not only be concentrating at looking at the menial events of emergency and hospitalization and so on. One should also be planning for the future to cover debt. So once one gets married, the first thing we do is basically we look at a nice car, we look at nice furniture, we look at having the big wedding, we look at all the luxuries, having all the luxuries in life to make our spouses as comfortable as possible. However, that is not what we should be looking at. The expensive wedding, it's going to last a day. You're not going to recover the money very quickly. As far as this scenario is concerned, one should be looking at securing a place to stay, and in doing so, maybe looking at securing your own household. So by purchasing a house means that one has to enter into debt, because the housing market today, I don't think one could achieve purchasing a proper property under 1.5 million rand in today's terms. So once one touches debt, that puts an umbrella over you, not for protection purposes. That's the umbrella of rain. So the sun might be shining everywhere, but that umbrella showers rain upon you, because that is a burden placed upon you for the next 20 to 30 years to repay a bond. So the question Muhammad asks in that scenario is, what happens if something happens to you as the breadwinner? What happens to the household? What happens to the house? And what happens to your family? And in this scenario, basically, he comes up with risk covers that can basically protect you, not to you yourself, but protect your family ultimately against these types of eventualities that might happen in life. The risk cover we speak about is basically life cover, which is extremely contentious within certain communities and cultures. But in today's day and age, the question is asked, how is this important enough to give it some thought? We need to be looking at securing our families, securing our households, and making sure that beyond our death, that life goes on for those we leave behind. Once we've done this and we've secured our lifestyles in this regard, we should also be looking at making sure that in death, not only do our families and loved ones sit with a property that basically doesn't generate an income, we should also be looking at building a nest egg for sustainability going forward. During this phase of life, there's various other options as well. As your parents before you gave birth to you, so you will too have kids. And so they will too go through life. And from experience, I can speak that raising a child is not cheap. At birth, just the monthly expenditure reaches between 4,000 and 8,000 rand a month. And that's just to make it as comfortable as possible for the child. When the child reaches school, there's additional expenditure. Good schooling is not cheap, both primary and secondary school. And thereafter, as we mentioned before, tertiary education too is a very expensive medium. So these are all things that financial planning takes into account, and things that we should be making adjustments within our lifestyles for. And when I say adjustments, I don't mean that let's take X amount of what's left over after our monthly expenditure and after entertainment and place that into savings. Warren Buffett said it very well. And he said, you should not be saving what's left over from your income. You should be spending what's left over after saving. So he places the emphasis on saving, and I think earlier in this year we saw the Minister of Finance stand up before the nation and speak, deliver the budget speech for 2017. And in the speech basically, the one thing that came out, and that was within transformation, was that he wants to create a savings culture among South Africans, because in the world we are amongst the worst savings cultures as South Africans. The eventualities of this stage in one's life is insurmountable. If you have 2 kids, you know that they're eventually going to get married. You know that you're going to have to fork out for that. That's before the marriage even, to fork out for the educational costs. You know that they're going to bother you for a computer, a fancy cell phone, maybe a first car even. And if you, by the means, to maybe set them up in life, to even give them a home to start off with. This stage of life is probably the most expensive stage of your life. Moving on from there, basically, once your kids have now married and they've concluded their education and have had the kids, you become something called an empty nester, according to Mama Jaffa. An empty nester basically means that you've now reached the stage where your children have moved out and they've basically moved onto their own, and they're no longer a burden on your financial status. They're working on their own, and so on and so on. So now you yourself and your wife are left alone in your house, looking to the future and enjoying the years ahead. This might still be a time that you are working, but also it's a time that one should be looking at slowing down and eventually reaching those retirement years. Now, when looking at retirement, according to the financial planner, retirement is something that shouldn't start late. It's something that should start very early. I know that most of us only wake up after the age of 40 and realize in 20 years' time, I'm going to be standing at the threshold of retirement. Have I made the proper and necessary provisions in order to live life comfortably without an income, just living off my investments and the provisions I have made for these years. Now this is a very important time. So during these last few years, after your kids have moved out and you've become an empty nester, now's the time to basically start looking very seriously, if you are still working, at placing most of your disposable income into these types of solutions in order to facilitate the need of retirement at the age of 60 or 65, or maybe even 70. Once we reach retirement, years where basically the financial planning concepts really kick in. So at this stage, basically, you've planned your entire life for this one event, and this one event is the time that you're going to enjoy the years. And I know we all have that dream of lying on white sandy beaches, enjoying life, sipping whatever it is that we're drinking. But at the end of the day, those types of facilities need to be made throughout your life in order to achieve that goal of comfortable retirement. The concept of retirement ultimately is not an easy one. It's quite a complex deal according to the financial planner. The advice rendered by them, obviously, or by our financial planner, Mr. Muhammad Jaffer, is that one should be looking at exactly how to structure one's income at retirement. So there's various options that's available to individuals, those options being living annuities, life and pension annuities as well, and generating an income therefrom. And then also, I mean, you do receive a lump sum, 1/3 portion of your pensionable income at retirement. And the importance thereof is to look at exactly how one saves that money or invests that money to last for a longer period of time. So the advice rendered by the financial planner is at retirement, use the available cash portion made available to you under the Pension Funds Act, and settle as much of your debts as possible to free up your income which you will receive from your retirement funding. Once this has been achieved and you're living a comfortable life, financial planner says now's the time to start looking and planning towards that final event on this earth, that is death. The morbid part of financial planning is planning what happens beyond your existence. And this is where estate planning comes in. So estate planning basically takes into account exactly what would happen to all your assets, as well as your available cash, as well as insurance that would pay out at that time at death. What would happen? This is such an important part, because so many times within our communities we find families broken apart due to infighting of assets, cash and various other things that one has accumulated over one's life. I, for one, wouldn't want to see that happen in life. This year is a pivotal part of financial planning and leaving the legacy behind into the future. The financial planning process we conclude with is not an easy process, and a layman or even a finance person, it's not easy for you to put something like that together, and it might even be impossible to make the right decisions. Everything done in financial planning is a calculated decision, taking your life and your life events into account, the importance thereof, and what your needs are going forward. We thank Muhammad Jaffer from Mojaf Financial Services for availing himself for the 12-part series, and we know that this has benefited the community tremendously, and maybe even stimulated a little bit of a savings culture within our community. The Finance Forum, being very compliant with the law, We always encourage you to seek financial advice from a registered financial planner, financial advisor, or registered financial planner. We never ever recommend that you make decisions based solely on what you hear, even here on this program. Our encouragement is always to find a financial planner, place trust in him, and let him decide your future. You've been watching the Finance Forum, and this has been a conclusion to the series on financial planning. I'm Abdu-Raof Hanslo. Until next time, stay focused to your finances.